Transylvanian Sunrise by Radur Cimar with Peter Moon. Since returning from Romania, I have reported on my adventures with David Anderson, his time travel research center, and my adventures in Romania, which were centered around the Atlanticron conference. When I arrived at Atlanticron, David told me that as the conference progressed throughout the week, it would become more deeply involved with the subject of astropaleology. This refers to the study of ancient stones or megaliths and how they relate to the position of the stars. There are various astronomical stone calendars around the world, but one of the most significant is in Romania and is known as Cimar. It is well south of Transylvania and the larger mountain ranges of Romania. Cimar was the capital of the ancient Dacian Empire. The Dacians were a very advanced civilization. If you look at the Romanian Sphinx, the oblong top of the head resembles an ancient Dacian helmet. Dacia is pronounced Disha by Romanians and sounds very much like the Germans pronounce Deutsche, the name for their native homeland. Although no one seemed to grasp it when I pointed it out, the two words sound so much alike that I could not help but wonder if the Germans descended from the ancient Romanians. The connection is obvious. More importantly, the ruins of Cimar possess insight into the future. According to Romanian scholars I talked to, the knowledge of ancient Atlantis was coded into these ruins and their relative position to the stars in order to signal the return of ancient wisdom. Pursuit of this knowledge is part of the reason why I went to Romania in August of 2008, and this concerns the amazing discovery in the Bucegi Mountains not far from the Romanian Sphinx X. The details of his discovery will be published in the next couple of months in the book Transylvanian Sunrise by Radur Cimar with Peter Moon. The new book, Transylvanian Sunrise, is not only about an incredible discovery that will change the way humanity looks at itself, it is also a book about the remarkable circumstances surrounding the discovery. This not only includes the political intrigue surrounding it, but the primary person who is the curator or local djinn of the area. We know him in the book as Cesar Brad, a psychically gifted individual since birth who was monitored closely by the then communist government. It was Cesar's unusually long and almost impossible to cut umbilical cord that caused his doctor to report him to the authorities. As we learn from this book, Romania had all sorts of secret facilities that harbored people with remarkable or strange abilities. Ceausescu, the corn psychology, sociology, and other aspects of the human condition. By the time he reached full adult status, Cesar himself was assigned to head up Department 0. It is apparent that this assignment had been ordained by destiny and guided by key players such as General Obadia and Dr. Zine. A considerable part of Transylvania Sunrise concerns Cesar's divulgence of his personal story and anecdotes to Radur Cimar, the author. Radur, who seems like something akin to an innocent bystander at first, also has an important role to play in the story. Seemingly picked in the beginning as a trusted individual to tell Cesar's story, fate would also afford Radur a remarkably rare opportunity to visit the remarkable discovery site in the Bucegi Mountains, and later communist dictator had them isolated and monitored for his own benefit. They were organizationally placed under Department 0, headed by a mysterious General Obadia. Besides dealing with individuals with mysterious powers, Department 0 dealt with all sorts of anomalous and psychic phenomena that would appear in the country. Although Ceausescu had arranged for the funding of the department, he pretty much left them alone. Department 0 was so secret that most people in Romania's government, including their intelligence services, knew virtually nothing about it or that it existed. When Ceausescu was deposed, this opened the door to political problems with regard to the possible misuse of these individuals and Department 0 itself. Fortunately, General Obadia was a spiritual man who was chosen by fate to deftly guide Romania's most guarded secret department into a new era of government with relative freedom for the population. Secretly, Obadia never supported Ceausescu and foresaw his downfall. He was also clever enough to secure his own position during the regime change. Despite the repressive times of communism, there was still a ray of hope, and Obadia was in the thick of it. He was the mentor of Cesar Brad and saw to his safety, but he was helped in this regard by an occult master from Red China, a mysterious drive. Zine, who monitored Cesar and kept him on a positive path. Besides his tutelage of Cesar and other special people, Dr. Zine had considerable influence in Department 0. As a member of a communist regime himself, he was free from suspicion and immune from the dictator. As Cesar grew up, his natural psychic abilities were enhanced and supplemented by more formal studies of become involved in investigations nothing short of miraculous. So that you have a better understanding of how these events are intertwined with David Anderson, myself and the Romanians mentioned, I will share some of Cesar's wisdom from the book. Some human beings are far above our conceptual, mental, or organizational standards. If they so choose, these human beings can transform other people's destinies through the power of their superior abilities. In this book, Caesar is demonstrated to have such superior abilities. To a degree, he explains how such abilities can be acquired through training. He not only trained hard and long, he had a special knack for it. What is more important is that this entire Romanian adventure involves transformation, not only for myself, David Anderson, and the others involved but for the entire human race. Caesar, however, does not suggest that he is the be-all end or any such thing. He himself was being worked or influenced by General Obadiah and Drive. Zine. The general, in turn, was influenced by a gifted priest from the Orthodox Church who seemed to thrive during a time of religious repression. Even Ceausescu sought his advice but did so in secret. While Caesar's superior mind has transformed Radur Cimar's destiny in a very powerful way, it has also had an influence upon myself, albeit one that is not quite as dramatic, at least not yet. This now brings us to the mysterious prospect of David Anderson, who knows Radur Cimar but does not seem to have access to how he knows him. Their connection would seem to run through a parallel universe, or perhaps David is blocked from his real-world memories with Radur. Radur, likewise, does not remember knowing David Anderson. It is now time to consider David's role. Keep in mind that this book would never even have happened if it were not for David making his original trip to Romania and then making contact with me. As David is literally a doctor of time who has literally accomplished the noble task of manipulating the fabric of space-time, he is a witness, willingly or unwillingly, consciously or unconsciously, to all of the accompanying phenomena that goes with that. In other words, when you build a better mousetrap or produce a hit record, the world comes to your door. In David's case, this represents the jinn and all the accoutrements that come with them. The military is an obvious gateway to all sorts of hidden phenomena. To some degree, David himself reminds me very much of Caesar because he is surrounded by high security circumstances and has a tendency to work at the highest levels of government. Just as Caesar seems to be placed by invisible spiritual means into a closely guarded high security area that represents deep import with regard to world events, so does David. As opposed to Caesar, who seems to have experienced a relatively peaceful youth with intense instruction, David seems to have stumbled into the awareness of his quantum self by reason of the technology he has developed, as well as serving a destiny that is still waiting to be revealed. All of this represents an area of study which is known as exopolitics. Exopolitics became a hot topic in the 1970s when Jimmy Carter, a known UFO sympathizer, took office. At that time, Peter Schwartz and Alfred Weaver from the Stanford Research Institute, a quasi-government research lab, did extensive research and proposed a government program to study the UFO phenomenon. Considerable effort went into this, and it was championed by the Carter administration, but the Pentagon killed the program, telling SRI, there are no UFOs. One of the researchers, I forget which one, ended up in Canada as an exile from this country. The Stanford Research Institute included Scientologist Ingo Swann, but was essentially a bunch of government spooks who were operating their own Montauk extension. The important point here, however, is that there is an extensive database that has academically approached the entire gamut of extraterrestrial influence on the Earth. You can read more about exopolitics on the web if you like. There are also books on it. It should be noted, however, that cover-ups of strange phenomena are as old as the presidency itself. Theodore Roosevelt was known to have kept secret the debacle of the great airship mysteries of the 19th century. Since the beginning of time, rulership over men has had its privileges, hazards, and strange peculiarities. If you study the subject of control, let alone the specific aspects of exopolitics, it stands to reason that the more powerful leaders of tribes and civilizations became, the more and more phenomena they encountered or heard about. World leaders have always gotten all sorts of strange reports. It would also stand to reason that, in certain cases, controlling forces, whether they be ETs, jinn, or some other type of spiritual entity, placed an imprint on the affairs of man. How deep this imprint was is speculative and debatable, but the reaction of leaders to esoteric truth has been reactionary for the most part and often downright violent. Enough said. The adventures of Caesar, Radur, and David Anderson offer a ray of hope that we can decode these mysteries. There is no question that all three characters work in a realm where access is restricted. In his work, Radur quotes Caesar, who says, in effect, that access to such information is by way of initiation. Specifically, Caesar states that obstacles and barriers at the astral level are meant to serve as a selection process for those who want to learn certain secrets and mysteries. Further, that this sort of restriction can be met where protection must be secured, as in the case with treasures or special and secret storehouses, certain gates, galleries, or quick access pathways to other spots on the planet or even other worlds. At other times, as travel obstacles restrict access to certain occult initiations or mysteries that are protected by specially summoned guardian entities. These should not be construed as immutable restrictions, but they concern mostly those who are not sufficiently evolved and therefore not yet ready to confront certain mysteries without being intent on using them for personal and selfish purposes. There is a lot more to be said about the practical ways of acquiring conscious astral division powers, as well as about other details concerning the very experience of astral division, but the time will come when we can talk about all this in detail. Caesar's insight is most relevant. We have all learned something about time by reason of our own initiation into the mysteries of life. Caesar's wisdom, however, is suggesting the mysteries behind the mysteries. The door has been opened a crack and we are in pursuit. With regard to David Anderson, Caesar also has insight into time travel with his explanation that traveling in time is nothing else than the expansion of consciousness, which then has access to the reality of the energy of time. This is difficult to achieve and few people get to master and control it to perfection. But there are intermediary stages as well. It is obvious that all of this phenomena with David is an intermediate stage. While Caesar paints a picture of unlimited potential, and he is certainly not wrong about that, there is also an adversary which makes the task ahead a formidable one. We are talking about the presence of evil and the resistance to penetrating this knowledge and the more exciting adventures it brings. A good deal of Transylvanian Sunrise deals with the repression of the discovery that has been made and the effort to use its benefits only for the purposes of a corrupt Masonic elite. Before the discovery is even made, Caesar is approached through diplomatic channels by a high-ranking Mason who is also a director of the Bilderbergers. This Mason, Signore Massini, somehow mysteriously knows not only of Department Zero but of Caesar himself as the gatekeeper to mysteries in Romania. Long before the discovery was realized, the Pentagon had discovered an anomalous area in the Busigi Mountains through advances in satellite technology, part of which was made possible courtesy of David Anderson's warp field technology. Specifically, it was a closed-off and inaccessible area in the Busigi Mountains that looked just like a similar area in Iraq. Quite apparently, the war with Iraq had much more at stake than the obvious rhetoric led us to believe. Other independent sources have also suggested this. Signore Massini has obvious ties to the Vatican as well as tremendous influence, if not outright control, of certain important positions at the Pentagon. Although very powerful, he has reached beyond the limits of his power with regard to the discovery in the Busigi Mountains, an area which he very much wants to control. He is forced by circumstances to appeal to Caesar for his consent to open up this mystery. Caesar is in a tough position because he understands the evil that this man represents, but also the fact that he might lose his position if he rejects his request. Massini also brings with him the technology of the Americans, who can penetrate the physical barriers surrounding the mysterious hidden chamber. Transylvania Sunrise gives a blow-by-blow description of the battle of wits between these two formidable metaphysical opponents. While it is not proper to reveal the entire outcome, the Americans do join forces with the Romanians and penetrate the mystery in a joint effort. In real-world politics, one can view the truth of these matters with Romania's sudden emergence on the world scene as a member of NATO. America is also now putting military bases in Romania, and the two countries have enjoyed a new diplomatic relationship which is unprecedented. If you are a sideline researcher and look deeply into the matters covered here and in the book, you will find out they are indeed reflective of the truth. In the end, neither Caesar nor Signore Massini get all of what they want. A compromise is worked out, but the chess match continues to this very day. A room or cave full of high-tech artifacts is discovered that make the concept of a Stargate seem dull by comparison. One of these features includes a projection hall where one can see the past history of mankind. It is uniquely specific to each individual who views it and is tied to the DNA and biofeedback of the observer. There are also 3 tunnels which lead to mysterious places, including Iraq, Egypt and Tibet. Since the writing of the original book, these tunnels have been explored to varying extents. According to what Radur has relayed, one of these tunnels was the province of the Americans. The others, however, have been explored by both Caesar and Radur. After penetrating these tunnels, with technological help from the Americans, a very successful expedition was made last October where contact was made with beings from the inner Earth. I cannot say more about it because that is all Radur has said about it. In his last letter to me, Radur has also stated to me that he is very sad because Caesar will be leaving him in the next few months as he now has a new job as an ambassador to their civilization. This all sounds very bizarre, but it is what was reported. Radur holds back a lot of information because he does not like to say things that he cannot substantiate. As a result of Caesar's imminent departure, I fired off copies of the Montauk Book of the Living for both him and Radur. Although it is not in my power to prove any of these claims, it is important to realize that the Masons have paid attention to Romania because they have known for a long time that it is a potential powder keg for them. There are prophecies and scrolls from the Vatican as well as the Vienna Museum with regard to Romania and the role it will play in the near future. The priest who influenced Caesar and General Obadiah also made a similar prophecy which has begun to be realized. How far this will all go is anyone's guess, but it is my karmic destiny and assignment to report on this and ferret out what truth I can. Most recently, I have had some interesting dreams about David Anderson wherein he has gave me huge rings with all sorts of different keys. That is a good sign. I expect to hear from him soon with regard to my return to Romania. Peter Moon is best known for his work centered around the Montauk Project with Preston Nichols, and Peter has authored a number of books: The Montauk Book of the Dead, Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal, The Black Sun, The Spandau Mystery, and his most recent book, The Montauk Book of the Living. To find out more about his work or to contact Peter Moon, please visit www.skybooks.com. Love always, Mudra. January 14, 2011. Secrets of the Busigi Mountains in Romania. Events of 2003. The Secrets of the Busigi Mountains. http://illusionofpower.com/ Secrets of the Busigi Mountains in Romania / in the summer of 2003, in an unexplored area of the Busigi Mountains, Zero Team Department A. Top secret section of the Romanian Intelligence Service SRI has made an epical discovery that could completely change the destiny of mankind. Colossal diplomatic pressures coming from the United States of America on the Romanian government for not disclosing to the whole world this discovery led to a temporary agreement between the two countries, and an unusual collaboration in scientific and military special team went to sea shipment. The implications are far more complex due to the brutal interference of the Order of the Illuminati, which sought to take control of both the location of discovery and the Romanian American expedition. Expert in studying and researching strange phenomena and also the leader of the exceptionally strategic importance of operations for the Romanian state, Caesar Brad is the hero of the shocking events that occurred in the Busigi Mountains, but also two memorable meetings with a leading representative of the Illuminati and Bilderberg member. The Busigi Mountains, Bilderberg in Romania. In May 2003, Caesar was visited by an important character for one issue in particular. The meeting request came through SRI as a result of government intervention. The person was a foreigner, but spoke very well Romanian. He also knew Romania very well. SRI knew only that he was part of a Masonic lodge very important in Italy that has a high-ranking nobility and has a very strong financial influence in Romania. His political influence was also very high since he managed to penetrate the wall of SRI agents and reach the DZ. Caesar felt a high pressure and a heavy weight around this person. He was surrounded by a cloud of heavy, unpleasant radiation which concealed his true intentions. For this meeting, Caesar prepared thoroughly, isolating himself in a room and falling into a state of deep meditation to learn more about the person. A SRI helicopter brought this arrogant, tall gentleman, wearing a black suit. He had a cane with ivory handle and gold inlay. His face expressed harshness and his green eyes had a strange effect, radiating unusual coldness. It was presented as Senior Mazzini. He was very sure of himself and created the impression of a person who was used to give orders. He was leading one of the most venerable major Masonic lodge in Europe and was one of the most influential Masonic organization in the world, the Bilderberg Group. Mazzini entered directly into the subject by saying that people are of two kinds: those that can be manipulated and led, most, and others who have certain virtues and a strong personality. He said that his group is part of the highest Masonic order and is very interested in the outcome of the discussion. Caesar said he knows some aspects of Freemasonry. Mr. Mazzini said that the Bilderberg Group is not itself a lodge, but it means much more than that. He said that the lodges are just facades and the real power is much higher than the 33rd hierarchical level. Mazzini invited Caesar to join the group, letting him understand that he will have many advantages. Mazzini manifested a great power and an unusual psychical force, in contrast with his age. Unfortunately for him, his power was centered on a huge ego, arrogance and sense of superiority over others. Mazzini said that he requested a meeting with Caesar through the power and the relations he had, because they appreciated Caesar's powers. The Pentagon spies with satellites. A Pentagon satellite used for geodetic espionage based on bionic technology and shape waves, discovered in 2002 a separate unit in a specific area of the Busigi Mountains. The empty space inside the mountain was not identified in correspondence with the outside. The empty space begun directly from inside the mountain at a certain distance from its slope. The empty space had the shape of a well-made tunnel and the route of it was perfectly planned. The satellite scan of the mountain revealed two major energetic blocks. The dams were made of artificial energy. The first was the plan as a wall that was blocking access to the tunnel. The second was huge, like a dome or hemisphere, at the opposite end of the tunnel, near the center of the mountain. Massini acknowledged that there is something extremely important and was very well protected. The whole tunnel hemisphere was in a plane parallel to the ground, and the dam is vertical hemispherical corresponding rocks on the ridge called Babel. In fact, the vertical slope ended at about 40 meters, 131.2 plus feet, between Babel and the Sphinx of Busigi, Sphinxschild in Busigi. A similar structure in Iraq. The Pentagon team noted that hemispherical energy barrier has the same vibrational frequency and the same shape as one another very secret underground structure that they had discovered before, near Baghdad, Iraq. Shortly after this discovery, the Tragi War broke out, and after a few months Americans had access to the biggest secret in the area, which the Iraqis knew nothing about. Editor's note: one reason I believe that the American military-industrial complex is in Iraq. Access to ancient ruins, secrets and their destruction so others will never find the truth. Massini also said that what was there was about the planet's mysterious past and the history of their organization. When the Pentagon investigation noted the similarity of the data between the underground structure near Baghdad and the one from Busigi, Massini and his Masonic Lodge was suddenly very agitated. Initially, they've almost panicked. The panic was due to the fact that this structure, much larger and more complex than the one from Iraq, is on Romania's territory. From Alexander, it seems that Romania has a very important mission in the years to come, and the reptilians also have this information. Above the Busigi Mountains we also have an energetic pyramid. Its shadow can be seen twice a year, which has a protective purpose and also keeps safe the true knowledge that is about to be revealed to everyone when the time comes. Massini provided the correct plan to reach the tunnel, as it has been calculated by experts in the Pentagon. The breakthrough was possible close to 60 to 70 meters from the first energy barrier on the side of the mountain. Massini promised ultra-sophisticated U.S. military technology to achieve breakthrough into the first energy barrier. It was a very powerful device for high-speed drilling of rock that used a strong plasma jet and a rotating magnetic field. Massini urged strict secrecy on this matter. The discoveries of 2003 in the Busigi Mountains: the machine first drilled by a strange deviation of the magnetic field, but later corrected its trajectory. The gallery looked like a subway tunnel, was perfectly polished and led to the enigmatic tunnel discovered by the satellite. At the end of the tunnel was a huge stone gate which was moved by sliding it to the left. But before this gate, there was a huge energy barrier. 3 people from the first special intervention team were very close to the invisible barrier. They touched it imprudently and died of cardiac arrest on the spot. Any object, rock, plastic, metal or wood, through at the barrier, immediately turned into fine dust. 2 generals from the Pentagon and the U.S. presidential advisor came there. Secrets of the Busigi Mountains: the Great Gallery. Massini knew most about the origin of this discovery and had knowledge of at least one item that was in the Great Hemispherical Hall. Beyond the formidable energy barrier, which caused the deaths of 3 people, was the solid rock gate. Into the tunnel's wall, just in front of the gate, was an area of 20 cm. On this esquire was precisely drawn an equilateral triangle pointing up. The esquire was located between the huge grinding stone gate and the invisible energy barrier. Caesar felt that there is some compatibility between the energetic barrier and himself, something like a mutual sympathy. His hand lightly touched the surface of the energetic barrier and he felt tingling on the skin. He submitted and passed completely through the dam, no more than an inch thick. U.S. officials were absolutely stunned. Tapping the triangle from the center of the esquire polished rock, Caesar initiated a huge stone gate which silently slid into the wall. This single command cancelled the energetic barrier and also opened the stone gate. The Great Gallery was now shown in its entire splendor. Even though there was no light source, the Great Gallery was lighted. But after turning off the first energetic barrier, the huge hemispherical shield at the other end of the room suddenly turned to a higher vibration level and began emitting higher radiations. On a closer analysis, the wall inside the Grand Gallery seemed synthetic but also felt like something organic was part of it. It had the color of oil, but the reflections were green and even blue. The wall material was somewhat rough to the touch, but it could not be scratched or bent. Resisted any attempt at breaking, piercing scratches or cuts. In a strange way, the fire flames were absorbed within itself. Practically, the fire could not stay on that material. Americans have recognized that the material is a strange combination of organic and inorganic matter. At 280 feet, the gallery suddenly turned to the right in a sharp angle. At a greater distance, a blue light was noticed, that sparkled like a star. The blue light at the end of the gallery was just the reflection of the protective shield of energy. In the Tragy underground, the U.S. advisor on national security issues was notified that the energetic shield from Iraq, in Baghdad, was suddenly activated, pulsating at a high frequency. In front of the shield also appeared a hologram of the planet, which sequentially and progressively depicted the European continent, then southeast, then the Bucegi Mountains from Romania, and then finally showing their location within the structure's corridor. It was obvious that the two hemispherical energy shields were in a direct connection. The bad news was that the U.S. presidency was notified and contacted the Romanian diplomacy through intelligence. In just a few tens of minutes, the whole operation had been disclosed. Lord's Massini plan went down the drain. Initially they wanted to take political control, but the Romanian politicians who were entitled to be aware of these issues have panicked and could not cope with events. The diplomatic tension grew, increasingly more pressure as Washington demanded an urgent communication with the Pentagon generals at the scene of operations. CSAT, Supreme Defense Council emergency meeting. An emergency session of the Supreme Defense Council, CSAT, has created a huge wave of sympathy for the Zero Department. Most were shaken by the news they've received. The CSAT decision was to continue the research, but under the Zero Department's control and inventory everything found in the Great Room. From Bucharest the orders came in waves, cancelling each other, some very vehement, others elusive, everything betraying a very high tension. CSAT members were in continuous session, keeping in touch with the Bucegi Mountains. They've decided to make public the discovery after having first discussed the problem on all sides. Romanian state was to make a formal statement to the entire world. But some CSAT members vehemently opposed Romania's official statement. When the U.S. diplomacy has been informed that Romania will release to the press the discoveries, everything tuned into chaos. The president was called for a direct phone conversation with the White House. Within hours, the U.S. blocked all financial transactions with Romania and its access to all other financial institutions. Romania was about to declare state of emergency in the Bucegi Mountains and the capital. The talks between the U.S. officials arrived in Bucharest and the Romanian Emergency Department took place without a translator. They were very violent, everyone was shouting, and the USA has uttered many threats of retaliation on Romania. Other countries in the world knew nothing of the problem, and Americans knew well that there were some very powerful countries that would united with Romania to support the immediate public statement. The official declaration would have provided evidence to the world about everything discovered in the Bucegi Mountains, including photos and anything else essential for a complete clarification. Leading scientists and researchers were to be invited. But most importantly, it would have revealed the truth about the very distant past of humanity and the real history, which is almost entirely counterfeit. The Americans have reacted very badly because that statement would have shattered in a second their global influence and power, and would have probably thrown into chaos their society. This was the main reason cited by them, to not create panic. But they forgot to acknowledge that this state of anguish and possible social disruption would have occurred as a direct result of deliberate deceit and manipulation made over the centuries by the Freemasonry. Also, a papal intervention occurred, who called for moderation before this great fundamental step for mankind. The Pope promised to make certain documents available to the Romanian state from the ancient papal secret archives, which are of great importance for Romania, and the evidence supports the discovery of the mountains. After 24 hours of talks, a final agreement occurred between the Romania and USA, and they've chosen to cooperate in some precise terms. The Romanian state was to postpone the disclosure and gradually present everything to the people. The projection room, the Grand Gallery, ended abruptly with a giant aula, 30 meters in height and a length of 100 meters. The projection room was smaller than the lecture hall of the mountain and was protected by the energy shield. Advancing towards the energy shield, a portion of it disappears like a door, allowing access to the projection room. The shield protects the room by any outside influences. Once inside the room, the shield becomes compact and looks like white golden wall. In the back, the shield doesn't descend to ground level like in the frontal area because at the back it's a stone wall. The wall has 10 to 12 meters high, and there were 3 enormous tunnel holes, one straight ahead and the other 2 symmetrical on both sides. They are lighted by a diffuse light in a greenish tint. Access to these tunnels was strictly prohibited by the secret protocol was signed between Romania and the USA. Tables for giants from the front of the entrance hall contains a series of huge stone tables arranged along the right wall, following its curvature. Similarly, there is another series along the left wall. None of the tables have a height less than 2 meters. On the tabletops were cut in relief, with precision, different signs of an unknown writing, characters that resemble ancient cuneiform. The writing also contains more general symbols such as triangles and circles. Although the signs are not painted, they come out with a fluorescent light radiation in different colors from table to table. There are 5 tables on each side of the room. On some of them are different objects that appear to be technical tools. From many of them descending to the ground are a lot of white, translucent wires which gather into rectangular boxes of shiny, silver material. The boxes are placed directly onto the ground. The cables are extremely flexible and lightweight, and light pulses can be seen circulating along their length. When approaching any of the tables, a holographic projection activates showing aspects of a particular scientific field. The 3-dimensional images are perfect and very large, with a height of almost 2.5 meters. The projections run by themselves, but at the same time they are interactive and depend on one who interacts with the tables by touching their surfaces. The discovery from the Bucegi Mountains, genetic combinations. Climbing on a specially broad tripod, the table surfaces can be seen. They are covered with a film of a dark glassy material. The film is divided into several large squares bounded by straight lines, forming a kind of grid. At one table the subject is biology and the projected image are of plants and animals, some completely unknown. Tapping one of the squares, the hologram shows the structure of the human body. It develops holographic images of various areas of the body that always rotate. Other squares show projections of other beings on other celestial bodies. By tapping simultaneously 2 different squares, a complex scientific analysis shows the DNA of both beings and possibilities of compatibility between them. On the side vertical lines appear, containing explanations, but in the strange writing seen everywhere, and at the end, the most probable mutant form appears as a result after combining the 2 genetic information. Love Always Mudra Episode 3 Disclosure Operations. The bad news was that the US president was notified and contacted the Romanian diplomacy, through intelligence. In just a few tens of minutes, the whole operation been compromised. Massini Lord's plan goes down the drain. Initially they wanted to take political control, but our politicians who were entitled to be advised of these issues have panicked and could not cope with events. Caesar decided to reveal all aspects of the plans and intrigues involving links with Massini. Diplomatic tension grew increasingly demanding more compelling as communicating with Washington's pressure on the Pentagon generals at the scene of operations. CSAT emergency meeting. The discussions were successful in Bucharest, in the sense that the facts were brought to the attention of people with great moral integrity and who are deeply patriotic. An emergency session of the Supreme Council of National Defense, CSAT, has created a huge wave of sympathy for the Zero Department. Most have been shaken by what they have learned since then. After the CSAT decision to continue research under the Zero Department to inventory what was in the huge room screenings. From Bucharest, orders they spend some more than others, cancelled each other out, they were vehement, when elusive, and betrayed a high voltage. CSAT members were in a meeting continue maintaining about the Bucegi Mountains. They have decided to make public the discovery of the formidable mountains of Romania, after having first discussed the problem on all sides. Romanian state was to make an official statement to the world. Several members of CSAT opposed vehemently. Romania's official statement. When American diplomat was informed that Romania will send a press release world of crucial importance for humanity, everything was chaos. Nobody knew, but everyone suspected that something is very serious and important. The president was called for a direct phone conversation with the White House. Within hours they had been blocked all transactions and agreements with international financial organizations of the Romanian state. It is expected momentarily order declaring a state of emergency in the mountains and the capital. Talks between U.S. officials rushed to Bucharest and had arrived on the Romanian side were made without a translator. They were so violent that few have not been moments of crisis that diplomats were shouting at each other as much, proffering multiple threats of retaliation. Other countries in the world did not know anything of this problem, and the Americans know well that there are always some very powerful countries would be united with Romania to support immediate public statement. The statement had contained the main data discovery Bucegi Mountains, providing evidence to the world, photos and other elements essential for clarification. It would have been invited leading scientists to study and research. But most importantly, it would have been revelations about the very distant past of humanity and real history that was almost entirely counterfeit. In no way. Americans have reacted so vehemently that statement would be shattered in an instant their planetary influence, and perhaps it would be thrown into chaos in their country's economy and society. This was the main reason cited by them, to not create panic. But they forgot to acknowledge that this state of anxiety and possible social disruption would have occurred as a direct result of deliberate deceit and manipulation made over the centuries by Freemasonry. He received a special intervention of the Pope, who called for moderation before this great fundamental step for mankind. Pope sent even as the state will provide certain documents ancient Roman papal secret archive which are of great importance for Romania, and the evidence supports the discovery of the mountains. After 24 hours of talks reached a final agreement by the Romanian-American cooperation in some precise terms. Position of the Roman state was to delay the disclosures, the presentation of their humanity gradually. Projections Hall, or Archive Atlanta, Grand Gallery ends abruptly in the auditorium inside the mountain giant who had a height of 30 meters and a length of 100 meters. Hall of Projections is limited by the energy shield and is smaller than the lecture hall of the mountain. Advancing to the energy shield, the shield portion is defined as a front door and then disappears and becomes straightsy to enter hall projections. The shield is designed to protect various adverse external influences. Once inside the hall, the shield is restored compact. From inside the shield has a white and gold. In the rear, shield not descend to ground level as in the front hall of the projections had covered half the back wall of rock. That massive stone wall, about 10 to 12 feet tall, are placed 3 enormous mouths of the tunnel, one straight ahead and the other 2 symmetrical on both sides of it are bright and diffuse, a greenish hue. Access to these tunnels is strictly prohibited by secret protocol was signed between Romania and the U.S. Projections Hall, or Archive Atlanta. Grand Gallery ends abruptly in the auditorium inside the mountain giant who had a height of 30 meters and a length of 100 meters. Hall of Projections is limited by the energy shield and is smaller than the lecture hall of the mountain. Advancing to the energy shield, the shield portion is defined as a front door and then disappears and becomes straightsy to enter hall projections. The shield is designed to protect various adverse external influences. Once inside the hall, the shield is restored compact. From inside the shield has a white and gold. In the rear, shield not descend to ground level as in the front hall of the projections had covered half the back wall of rock. That massive stone wall, about 10 to 12 feet tall, are placed 3 enormous mouths of the tunnel, one straight ahead and the other 2 symmetrical on both sides of it are bright and diffuse, a greenish hue. Access to these tunnels is strictly prohibited by secret protocol was signed between Romania and the US. I hope that I managed to create an idea of what happened in Bucegi. Sorry for my English language, I apologize. The actual country Romania have the same place less, the old pace which leave in the past Daci. Pupils Daci is ancients pupils, the Romanians pupils as offspring to Daci pupils. So my name is Dakis. All this is from future with Death's Head from Radur Cimar. Essential information. A few months after the last meeting where Caesar told me stunning revelations, the Venerable Mazzini, I was again contacted to meet with him. Was in early June 2003, and that was to be an extremely important moment to deepen the elements on which the world had learned about Masonry. Caesar's explanations I had built when I look at issues were still unclear from the story that first interview he had with Senior Mazzini. This clarification was necessary for me to have a fair view of the current situation as wide mankind, certain subtle mechanisms and laws are beyond understanding and the profane. Some direct relationship between traditional handling of Freemasonry and the illusion most living human beings. Another fundamental aspect of that meeting, knowing the information was highly confidential, Mazzini revealed that a senior Caesar. The otherwise, that was really amazing foundation for development which would be made in the Bucegi Mountains, shortly after the disclosure. Events were carried out quickly and I played the movie viewer who seeks ecstatic extraordinary of ancient mysteries. After a period of several months from their first issue, and the senior Mazzini kept his promise and visited again a Caesar, but by that time in a meeting held luxurious villa in Bucharest, which was high entertainment center, at the diplomatic level, the one of the most powerful country in the world. The invitation and the necessary preparations have been made Mazzini Sr. through diplomatic channels at the top of the state, almost like and if the first meeting. The difference was the fact that it was the General Obadiah he warned that a direct Caesar that invitation, but even a Secretary of State government to order one of the ministers. The meeting between the two was much shorter than the first meeting and consisted of a rather strange proposal made on the venerable Caesar he offered when an extremely confidential information in exchange for a promise to provide Masonry representatives access to the discovery of what was to be made on the basis that intelligence, little by little, uncover the hidden intentions of the venerable began to be pushed aside. Caesar guessed then that mobile as the first meeting with Senior Mazzini was in fact preparing the ground for his consent is sought from the second meeting. In those circumstances, it was likely that proposals tententel. Venerable had not, in fact, then throwing dust in the eyes to gain confidence Caesar and to cause it to facilitate control of what Masonry what could be a big state secret in Romania. Subsequent events were to Caesar's confirm these suspicions. The second meeting with Senior Mazzini took place in May of 2003 when Caesar came into possession of secret data which has provided Great Mason due position they have in DM and that this department was the only body action was empowered to intervene in that kind of special situations. Caesar Icke understood the main reason for which he was urged by Senior Mazzini. So after how he or she specified, leading representatives of global Masonry had a terrible power in almost every government on the planet, yet their influence can exceed a framework for action. They could, for example, to make and trigger wars between countries and populations, but could not force in certain directions held mainly by the internal structure and mode of body security and defense of the country. In other words, they could provide a relatively easy general framework for conflict on a continental area, but still could not compel a engagement within a country if there was a major reason, usually struggles involving ethnic or conquests of new territories. Case information of exceptional importance that gave him a Senior Mazzini Julius Caesar fit into an entirely different category. That information concerned a certain location in the Busigi Mountains, but it was incomplete. Just as Caesar had learned from Revered, there is something there that could not be identified even by means technological edge, and that was, in fact, the big question mark problem. Caesar realized that Venerable still have some more information that he did not disclose them. Although unaware of the reason, he understood that the information those were probably very important for world Freemasonry leaders since they have used all their influence to secure access. It was obvious that could not question of armed raids and force foreign troops in Romania regardless of reasons. Even if, for example, would have escalated territorial conflict Transylvania, this would probably require a long time, more campaigning, war destruction, especially a European diplomatic scandal. Clearly, this time Masons did not want it. The conclusion was that what was needed was of interest to her at greatest strength and excluded an intervention, especially knowing that aspect excluded by certain people. Among other things, this explains the secret to peak which was requested Mazzini Sr. in the two meetings, as well as leading representatives of the decision Bilderberg to Caesar only one contact in this matter. The reason was simple: had found the right person to have a huge office and operational decision particular case, then she had tainted with many promises, and thereby winning the confidence. Finally, she had determined to accept collaboration with the Great Masons and enable them to exercise control and influence at that level. Caesar was considered the ideal person for this plan, but co-option action had to happen quickly, not to leave too much time to think and also to avoid unpredictable side of him. Perhaps the mission was regarded as vital for Masonry world and she really needed to succeed. That is why he was sent a representative Bilderberg's leading expert in the psychology of recruitment, which, moreover, was fitted with certain distant psychic influence. From the data we had available then, Caesar realized that Freemasonry world sought to acquire in a short time control of a site Busigi secret, without any form of publicity and wanting even concealing staged power there to that place in Bucharest after representatives had the elite had access there. Such situations were on edge. As always when the big secret state, the leaks could jeopardize the entire action because their rival political parties were not fully controlled by Masons. Therefore, the operation is seen to be a particularly delicate. They had skillfully combined influence, discretion, action to exercise control and power. Even for Master Masons, the case was one very difficult, especially due to limited access that they had to coordinate at the research activities of the area of the Busigi Mountains. This was the general situation that I described it at the beginning of Caesar. Our meeting in previous months reflected the multitude of issues and implications deriving from the story first interview between Caesar and Senior Mazzini. A ripple area that had been included in some way explained the inability to understand all the nuances elements that we have learned since then. with no one to collect information on additional parent content to just make some discrete inquiries and to sort out in my mind a few items, general high even existential problems, and waited patiently for the signal. A new meeting with Caesar to find answers to them. He would be a meeting full of valuable meanings and explanations, which culminated in finding the secret that Senior Mazzini revealed to Caesar. Contrary to custom, technical director of the DM asked me to interview only 2 weeks after the second meeting he had had with the venerable Mazzini. He testified that he had done so because things are shown to be of utmost importance and that if no proper sanitation focus on future actions, they could escape from control, and the effects could become negative. Caesar did not know if in the near future would be had time and opportunity to meet me to reveal everything to me, therefore he preferred to expedite the meeting with me, to be sure that I will find all the information necessary to publish them in a credible manner. The following months would be extremely tense, and the novelty amazing discovery was made in the Busigi Mountains. As for my meeting with Caesar, which preceded the main event in August 2003, it was very well integrated in the oasis before the storm that had already appeared in sight. Explanations initiation. Glad I had the opportunity to clarify uncertainties about some aspects. The first interview between Caesar and Senior Mazzini, I asked what was the cause for Masons and those who are recruited into their ranks choose often deliberately the evil and actions are specific. I knew that in the current era, the general trend of humanity is to slip on the slope of moral decay, ethical and spiritual, yet I convinced that good can overcome this state of depression in people. With a very serious mind, Caesar explained to me then that the fundamental element human destiny is free will. As structured, the human being includes both good and evil. We can therefore say that if human nature coexist both its upper and nature lower. What is important is which of these two aspects is awakened and then amplified ourselves. I ask you now, perhaps, what is good and what is evil? No, I want to digress into philosophical observations and comments, but I will say however that the most simply, good can be understood as the absence of evil. Of course, with the same sense, evil is the absence of good. I think it's not a secret for you that combines these two Christian traditions aspects, heaven and that, hell. Beyond the spheres or planes but subtle their respective expressions, heaven and hell or in general, good and evil are found variety complex daily life of every man. Therefore, some people do not accidentally get to say in their misfortune that my life became a living hell or on the contrary, very happy when they say they live a life as paradise. It is clear that the option or choice you make, man can headed, metaphorically speaking, to hell or to heaven or paradise. If the choice it is there to do evil, no doubt he will go to hell and then in a sense, hell it will manifest itself, radiation and influence of such a person will then be. This will remove the evil and the realm of good and happiness. Those who choose evil is not meant to understand the existence of complete, and they have fighting so furiously against the good, harmony, love and beauty. However, need to know that human beings are completely free to choose between the two extremes, i.e. between good and evil. Nobody forces, no one undertakes, it is pure choice. Here, certainly has a great influence personal destiny, and some very deep trends in mind subconscious, but even when the strength and determination of these impulses seem to be insurmountable, is still a certain percentage and freedom of choice. Free agency do not ever go away completely. If so, then man would no longer be a mere puppet, fully subject to external forces obscure. Therefore, even in the dramatic situations, human beings are free to choose, so she can choose a good inspiration, they can move towards an unexpected chance and here, almost she can rebuild their lives in a completely amazing on other bases. It is equally true, however, that any choice involves sacrifice for the better. You heard someone that you ever make a sacrifice for the worse. Evil is always easy, slippery and are based on the force of inertia, and ignorance has also proved, because it involves effort. Therefore they say that it is very easy to do evil, but it is very difficult to FAP2 well. The main idea I want to understand here is that when their man sacrifices inertia and act in a harmonious way, he is already moving to another state and condition of life. It evolves because it sacrificed what that surrenders is less than to exceed to what is superior. But many people do not have the inner strength that is necessary to stop their bad habits or negative trends that manifest and therefore exist at the global level of humanity, a pronounced tendency to regress and amplification of evil and perversity. Means that just using Masonic elite of this inertia, laziness and mental darkness of most people to control world population. I spoke you. It is perfectly true. Masons are very easily handle this power lack of reaction, slowness, inertia obscurantism which most of people is structured very low vibration levels. In such situations, Masonry generates practical, a true state of drowsiness collective, which serves very well interests. This is very important to correctly understand how Freemasonry action. Often, these actions, which in some circles involving high Masonic realization of complex rituals of black magic, are made even from a distance, and those who are receptive to these energies TNLDN tudo are, pressing them to fall easy victims, gliding in a bizarre sort of sleep as lead. I do not mean, however, sleep only physically, but also a kind of state that are included a bullock people, make them to be very obedient and behave like puppets. That is the ideal in which they can be controlled and led without resistance. Here, then, the main purpose of Freemasonry, which they try to generalize the one whole planet. From another perspective, you should know that this sleep of the strange people is just a way of protective forces to defend the demon revelation of certain spiritual truths. If you are careful, and you'll see the reaction people at times when issues are communicated very lofty, spiritual and valuable about existence and evolution, you'll find with great astonishment that, especially when most of they face a strange drowsiness, obviously, such a state inertial excludes any higher understanding, any feedback and any constructive attitude. As I've exposed you things, understand that organizations have almost Masonry all the levers of action in society that people use to division and their effective control. I'd say they vehemently attacked everything as spiritual, genuine, sublime, aiming to transform humanity into a kind of living facility. You can act and will result in exactly as they want. I was dejected. An impotent rage stirred my being, and I could not find them antidote. Sensing my inner state, Caesar came to me with great kindness. You are right in what you said. Unfortunately, people have become some robot, listening to the orders they are given and just executing them. However, good to know that the force is tremendous and that any action in this regard may be proved extremely effective. There is always hope, just to know them feeding with great faith and purity. It will sharpen your alertness and will inspire you to act in a timely manner. Masons know that they have their weaknesses. Just wanted to ask you, in previous months I have sought documents the subject and learned with amazement that there are many different views, contradictions and misunderstandings between the various Masonic lodges in the world. If so, then means that they themselves are divided and powerless. Caesar smiled with understanding and explained my dilemma. One of the big tricks that made the Masonic elite is to create the impression that two or more Masonic lodges are fighting among themselves. In reality, the tip their Masonic pyramid structure forming the greatest masters of the ruling elite Freemasonry means well, but at the enemies as they appear. The idea is to create confusion because they know that they sleep vigilance man. In fact, it is a devilish trick, one that falls into its place without be advised not to choose one of the lodges believing that bad, but it will choose the other, who will think is good. Such things are only in appearance, because in reality, Freemasonry is and remains the same regardless of the fireworks that used for cheating man. You have to trust and be persistent in beneficial actions they commit. Ultimately, even the forces of evil are subordinate forces of good. And because it comes about, you know that a great mystery of occult universe is the role it plays in the context of the evil forces of evolution, i.e. how in which the evil creation in the economy. I was dumbfounded. Like most people, know that white is black and white is black. Now we learn that in fact there is even a sense and a correlation between these extremes. What do you mean? That even evil has a purpose in our lives. And still very important. However, to properly understand this issue must have an open and unprejudiced mind. Fanaticism, especially at religious or ideological, not good house with spiritual growth. I nodded in silence. I was all eyes and ears ready to listen to explanations I gave them. Valuable Caesar. The fact that the universe, as one can find, there is both good and evil is striking evidence proving the existence of human freedom of choice, i.e. his individual wishes to exercise free choice in life. Often, this delicate is the man to choose evil, which by nature is autodestructem. In other words, in ignorance man chooses to self-destruct, thus preferring to deny himself. Therefore, a deeper analysis, the choice of evil means first choice to fight against his own being, which ultimately will destroy itself. This mystery deepens the relationship between good and evil, because it implies the existence of a goal presence of hidden forces of evil in the universe and therefore each of the beings in the life. Human. I do not know to what extent you are familiar with the ideas about the meaning of existence and with the spiritual progress, but I will say that human evolution is, above all, the primary source's return, purely spiritual, from which came. Imagine yet the very fact that this origin is that sublime eternal happiness and every man wants. This return to its spiritual origins of human beings must be but fully conscious and free of any temptation bottom, all that could mean illusion, coercion, prejudice. If you understand this correctly, you can say that you understand the need for the forces of evil in creation. I was a little confused because not yet caught the essence of the problem. Caesar continued to explain a lot of patience. If evil did not exist, you were not able to realize the need return to the source and you linger indefinitely by who knows which parts of the universe. But evil is the creative role of humans test. In this way the practical test of knowledge, spiritual realization and the capacity to love each individual on the path of spiritual evolution, depending on the reactions and the choices he them, can tell whether the test passed or not that life. As the exams in college, I did a parallel. Exactly. As the exams as those in college or professional except that while they are illusory and ephemeral nature being surrounded by a limited temporal and spatial domain life tests or exams that make sense spiritual is very important steps in personal development. Passing success of such a test is an important victory in the fight for domination of nature inferior man and this victory can develop into an increased capacity to understand some subtle aspects of life, gradually acquiring maturity and discernment spiritual or a multitude of other beneficial and positive aspects. Caesar was a brief pause, as if to leave me time to think and reflect indoor. One want to be sure I understand. What is being tested and how to recognize these tests? I asked very carefully at the new course of discussion. Most exams test your faith and discernment of life. Often, however, due to ignorance, people interpret these tests as some great evil, as a curse or a bad hitting him, causing him to falter in such cases. Evil manifests itself primarily for human testing and purification. Nobody beyond, over its evolution, tests, lessons and exams for all sorts of life. Practically speaking, these tests are a confrontation with the forces of evil itself, which plans are subtle and satanic demon creation. This is applicable both individual case and if a couple or even a people or a community nations. Well, we are often helped by others when we are faced with trouble or when we ask for advice in a very difficult life. Who goes then the test, new or individuals helping? You must be aware that help is not to force. A person can be advised and driven on the right path, but remember that she has her own free arbitrator. To have free will, however, in other words to have a choice, involves that man is responsible for the freedom they have and they manifest. It can be helped, supported, but beyond that it boosted his freedom to choose between various possibilities at its disposal. If he were forced others to follow called path, even if this path is highly beneficial, it would mean that freedom is practically annulled. It is therefore very important for human beings to be let freedom of choice, but choice is good given the awareness and understanding that it is that being. Now know enough information about the implications of Freemasonry at world and are aware that on this planet is already giving a fierce battle between the forces of good and evil. However, every moment you are free to choose whose side want to be. If your inner structure, as is obvious, you have chosen well, then you act accordingly and will diligently pursue plans to fight for the annihilation Masonic. The same is true for other people, only that many they do not even know the facts regarding the mode of action and influence Masonry in the world. Furthermore, the game is so perverse evil forces that they are infiltrating insidiously find anywhere a fertile ground, that wherever there is a weak consciousness or perverted enough to cause it to say that word with great violence we are surrounded only by the paranoid who sees all around them only attack. Conspiracies, covert manipulation or games, that in fact, none of this does not exist. That all is well and naturally in natural place, in reality, such a behavior is typical for a demon being tormented by multiple influences, which she plays the game. If the person is part of the intellectual elite, whether it is man scientist, journalist or writer, then the better for Masonic plans. Feedback such a bad person, which can be assumed to have a certain authority intellectual, unfortunately contributes significantly to influence design other people. In fact, probably know that one of the greatest tricks of Satan is to a man to be convinced that the devil that Satan himself know. This is how it works in Masonic organizations, giving the impression that they do and want good. It is but an appearance, because in reality they battle more or less openly against the good, religion, faith and spirituality. One do not understand how it is possible for people to live in this huge conspiracy and however, not aware of its existence. I cried myself full of riot. Why are you surprised? You yourself, until recently, I used to go there and not have any clue about Masonry and appalling about her plans. Probably see just like everyone else, that many things go wrong, but still not address the problem in a more mature. Now you know your inner truth and substance, which is very good of you made immediately take attitude and want to share this knowledge to others. You already able to do extraordinary, publishing what I told you so far. The first step is to draw public attention to the reality that surrounds. It is analog speaking that when you pull the bells on Sunday in a city asleep, people start to wake up slowly and will then require more details. But even more importantly is that they will become much more careful everything that is happening around the world, and even because then they already have a basic solid information. Their vigilance is a first shot, very heavy, which is given Freemasonry, as a vigilant man is more difficult to be deceived, manipulated or controlled. Then will arise a general current of opinion that will ever catch much force, and so many plans and initiatives will be blocked even in Masonic. Bud. Caesar stood and looked at me, keen to see if I understand. However, the reaction seemed to me very weak, and I really wonder how we managed to achieve what we wanted, I said. Most prophecies predict that, eventually, defeat the forces of goodwill. Moreover, it is very difficult fight. Freemasonry world as a horrible hydra is one that performs all this satanic guidance that supports the people of entire planet. In Romania, for instance, especially lately, Freemasonry acts almost at will. Poor people who are kept in ignorance and handling, no, not even suspected that the cause of the tragedy that is always under the eye and lives oppressed. If the Hydra would be defeated, then we could talk about regeneration quick in all aspects, the whole world. Unfortunately, the vast majority of Western people not to notice how careful handling some them very obvious of Masonry. Apathetic and selfish, most prefer to isolate it in a strange form of hibernation town, having mistaken impression that it guides own life. Even if they learn about the evil actions committed by Masons, prefer to deny the convenience or to rely on the fact that others will take action in their place. More than that, they adhere to a crass ignorance to certain guidelines that are infused, and satanic Masonry encourage rampaging through rock music, drugs, alcohol, tobacco and the materialist conception. These conditions gradually stupidity, but steady, the human being who becomes devoid of will and determination of its own is pretty easy. The Freemasonry to fulfill the plan. Caesar suddenly silent. It was a rather long pause in which we both remained. Deep in thought, in the end he continued to speak, but his voice could see a slight hint of sadness. Unfortunately in our country the situation is identical. People like sleep are not awake, not lucid. Although some data have been published about the fundamental Freemasonry and its global plans, inertia and dramatic state of drowsiness people which is correlated with the sleep of reason has grown so much that they are catadykes-esque. Very few who even believe that what is being said about Masonry as possible, and that is a cruel reality. They find it so monstrous and incredible that, in a subconscious impulse of fear and self-preservation, they prefer to believe that perhaps not quite as bad as it is described, that such information made defamation actions are actually the destabilizing forces for who knows what obscure reasons, so prefer to close their shell again and stay longer on the inertia of which were covered before. The situation is even worse than one in which they knew nothing about planned satanic Freemasonry, because he knew, and however, not to act in accordance with what you know is a big coward and a serious violation. The basic moral code, in such a bad situation, is not one who does not know, but it poorly at that, knowing, acting as if they knew. Therefore, the first step and important is the awakening consciousness of the people of this terrible sleepy. If they do not become lucid, they will not understand why conditions are so difficult, and why it is happening so many absurd things. This also happens because many times the essence action is hidden Masonic symbols that are highly obscured. It was one of the sticking point that we wanted to clarify, one because I had done some correlations but still I needed more explanation. I asked one occasion, and Caesar, they use certain symbols in ritual actions to influence outcomes their satanic plans. There are indeed some Masonic symbols that are already well known, such as compasses and trowel. Others, however, are more obscured, for instance, the pyramid all-seeing eye on top of them, represented not by accident on US bill $1. In addition to symbols, Freemasonic estimates are also very Masonic lodges important for devotees, but they are little known other people. For example, all on a dollar bill is the Latin motto Et Pluribus Unum, which in translation means synthetic, the chaos to order, which now you can suggest so many correlations. If you analyze the current situation soberly, the world and also in Romania in terms of social, economic and political, will easily able to determine how this chaos is structured so as to ensure gradual establishment of the New World Order, which is not saying New Order Freemasonry so ignorant not to know who are actually creators, but the New Order. Another principle that it applies strictly Freemasons, especially lodges and the Masonic Brotherhood them, is the imperative that says all for one and one for all. It may seem strange, but know that compliance with this mandatory state confers unit and a display of strength and toughness which are considerable. For this terms must confess to you that if people from Romania or from any other part of the world manifests the same state of tenacity, the same driving force and the same systematic engagement, and if Masons, but, of course, facing a deep sense beneficial and positive when the current state of humanity, or at least a portion of it, would be different. But in this is very important to note, while the common man always has the choice available, guidelines are behind the Freemasons profoundly evil, even satanic, members of this organization that gives a certain state of terror, an attitude of subordination to the army almost. This makes those who act in these groups or to Masonic lodges and almost implacable their decisions. An order in Freemasonry is not discussed because at the start of the organization, those who are willing to accept an oath and perform a ritual horrible pervert which actually requires a total submission and obedience, otherwise agreeing to be killed. It means that beyond their actions in the physical, applied in some Masons ritualist occult processes and political initiatives which are evil, I found myself. They are an integral part of their practical and ideological system, but only from one level up. To understand better, evil rituals and invocations are made only those members who have reached a certain rank or position high in the tree, the lodge to which they belong. Typically, information that is revealed about Freemasonry does not insist on such subtle or psychic impact. You has giant sphere of influence of this evil group of people who joins it. Therefore, for the common man who learns some truths about her, Freemasonry is more of a mutual aid group, something like a gang thieves and charlatans. However, membership or integration of human beings in Freemasonry has strong negative effects such as the occult, which will resonate with distinctive features of the organization. In fact, this merger by joining the Masonic groups will create negative changes in the aura of being so deep that, as compared the status it had before joining, it will be forced to recognize the fundamental nature evil Freemasonry has the guidance. Then how do you explain their formidable power in areas of basic life, contemporary example in economics or politics? Indeed, Freemasonry is one of the most powerful groups at today. I would say that it is the only occult group that has political purposes. All other occult groups or organizations that exist are usually spiritual purposes. They are not engaged to carry out actions geopolitics because in their view they are ephemeral. If Freemasonry, the situation is completely different. Freemasons make a big emphasis on political involvement to make stagnant those who adhere to their organization only at this level, the influence and power they can have on the masses of people. This evil of Freemasonry result in so-called broken heart for those who enter its ranks. In fact, it is natural Masons to act this way because they use occult initiation is not intended in any way to develop and raise the soul of joining the organization. If the soul were that human beings wake up, then it could not be manipulated and determined to take numerous actions are clearly evil and satanic. From this point to the feelings of affection, kindness and compassion are completely alien to a Mason, as if he had not been allowed to order any longer. By means initiation ritual occult Freemasonry of adhering to the remove, in fact, these feelings because of the subtle point of view when he makes a pact with the forces Fey demon, the forces of darkness. Unfortunately, most times being concerned or not even realize this terrible setback that occurs in its existence. When promoting an elite member of a Masonic lodge in a high and very important position in the organization, it has some subtle criteria by which if that person is aware enough to model in the direction of actions. Demon. I myself have found out later, after my first conversation with Senior Massini, many of these revelations about Freemasonry. It is almost incredible how much dirt human can exist above the top of their hierarchical pyramid, but everything is polished and made appear bright and noble, fabulous wealth through their possession of relationships, influence and control they have in the extraordinary world, provided they are experts in testing those we receive from or on advancing its position very high in their organization. I was naive to imagine that I cheated a venerable Massini, making one to believe that I accept his proposal of membership without discussion and collaboration. The old man was very astute. Very amazing information that I provided them with on their methods of action have been included, in a way, the test or, rather, race to which I was subjected. Most likely, however, that he knew long before that there was no problem for me to accept it. Indeed, did not meet their standards rotting soul, and I had a great spiritual force and a strong discernment to realize the truth hateful in respect of, without being lured to their proposals. However, as you'll see, the game was too important and they had to risk, but they did it in a very complex. Masons are not stupid, by contrast, have very high intelligence, but it has a perverse nature, even diabolical, so you can serve in the administration of evil plans. In addition, at higher levels in their hierarchy, they currently use some occult energies natural, but they use the bad or the very lower. Not accidentally, Freemasonry is, just as I said, the only group that has for occult political. So there are no fools, but in some extreme cases they can be turned, aiming for a particular purpose, they are fools. This was the case of the 2 meetings that we had with Senior Massini. It is very likely to be screened mental venerable yet before the whole discussion one mean the first date he has had with me. In fact, it was more of a monologue of his own, which calls for my hypothesis. He knew exactly what I say, how to behave, how to make my proposal for collaboration and how to tempt me to accept it. Above all, however, knew how to let me believe that I myself have a wrong, giving them know that I accepted the proposal. He knew, therefore, that you, but I do not I thought he knew it. Only after several weeks, I was surprised to find out the truth, through secret channels of information and intelligence of the risks. It seems that Mazzini told, full of pride, something about the discussion held with me, personalities high-ranking political hierarchy in Europe, and so I learned, actually score the first real meeting. The situation remained, however, very complicated. If he knew that I lie and pretend it, then why he played all that charade, telling me that I will even make a second visit when I had to communicate something very important. The role played in the first meeting was exceptionally well played. Telling me all these shocking truths about Masonry, he practically forced me to my schedule strategy of deceit, which was waiting. Then was necessary for me to be convinced that he believed the lie of my acceptance. Moreover, the scheduled a second meeting, which would be even more important than the first. What was, however, the plan as complex and highly obscured? What Mason strenuously sought if were willing to risk even a misleading attitude on my part. Mean that the objective was really important to them and that gave not stop at anything to get. A first conclusion was that, in a sense, constituted mainly pie in all that mysterious problem, which still did not know anything. It was obvious that if I still asking, could not be based only on me in relation to this objective. But who was that? By the nature of which make long zero department, could suspect that their interest was related to something quite exceptional, which was related only intervention teams operating in the department, teams that run them myself. Logically speaking, this implies that they wanted to have access to a state secret that I do not know, but they knew they could not reach except through me, thanks I had the special function in the department. They thought I was the only sensible conclusion that could be correlated with Mazzini venerable attitude. It was clear that to achieve this goal in this case, it was willing to risk everything. What could determine, however, the world's largest Masons to orient with so much interest to Romania? I already knew about the existence of prophets very obscured, Christians made two great saints of the past century, they concerns the future of Romania in the context of the future of all mankind. I also learned, top secret existence of a very valuable parchment in the vast library of Vatican, which exhibits the same problem with the Romanian territory, a situation closed mentality and great pride in conceivable states and world powers. There also in the secret archives of the Museum of History in Vienna, a very old document exhibit extremely distant historical past and also fabulous civilization that existed those times in Romania. Therefore, these are all different sources, two of them very old, which largely covers the same things. In these conditions it's difficult to believe that we are dealing with a scam. In addition, there are many other aspects that correlate. For instance, the prophecies say that it is a matter of just a few years until outbreak of signs that will draw attention to that area. On the other hand, must know that the Freemasons are very careful in this country because they know that most long big problem for them at the planetary level, this is the place. They themselves know very well prophecies about the future of Romania, and I know that most problems are even in this part of the globe. Therefore, they are very attentive and interested in what is happening in our country. This explains their backstage intrigues and machinations of the economy and country's policy, in order to ensure that control and generate the same kind of groups and the weird and often claim they finance with fabulous sums of money in these groups. They have attracted and still attract naive people with a weak character, but hungry for easy gains, which are even willing to sell their soul to arrive only in the so-called high society and rich. The main purpose of these mini-organizations is to block any attempt spiritual or social development and economic normality of the population, while creating impression that their work is very hard in these areas. So when I learned that you conspire a cunning plan of the elite Bilderberg group, we linked all these issues because the situation seemed obvious, and furthermore, I know about some secret items which related to the future people they had learned from the parent arsenic Boca, with more than 15 years ago. One who is endowed with a minimum common sense, a lucid and pay a certain intuition, is virtually impossible to not notice how often amazing and very complex it is most of the prophecies come true. Based on what we already know and seeing the insistence of senior action in Mazzini this case, I sense that the issue is of utmost importance for Freemasonry, and for the entire country. There I remained, however, than to wait next meeting with the Patriarch to understand what they actually Masons from me. Basically, it did not matter at all if I lied to them or not anyway, because it would not be met extravagant promises which I never had them. For them it was important to them facilitate access to something that now no one I do not know. It seems that the problem was very delicate, since it no longer afforded to intervene in people power highest decision, i.e. the figures in the political sphere and state leadership. If just wanted secrecy and concealment to those with whom most of the intrigues and costly plans mean that the situation was extreme and fit the parameters maximum security. I confess that I myself was very excited by this, but then I had no other additional data. Although I rely on logical inferences only on intuition, and information security had received the second meeting would confirm all my suspicions. Power policy had been circumvented. Even I wondered why the Venerable decided not to intervene in this matter through diplomatic channels very high. I said, I understand that the elite did not want all Masonic advertising if you plan to have, but on the other hand, a direct order, the very top, it would be increasingly sophisticated meetings with senior exempt Masini. In your case might not even be sure the final result, while direct government intervention in the case could have very easy and immediate access to what they wanted. Your observations are correct. However, remember that they have certain limits of influence policy, which differs from country to country. Probably felt that way as uncertain Romania, although obviously it would be easier. Even if this option were to go, they had only had access but no control over what was of interest. However, Senior Massini I stated very clearly the terms of cooperation at the second meeting, told me that their people have there, which must work together closely, thus following directives. Masonic elite. In case of involvement of political figures in this issue, things would not be able to be just because of vanity or some unpredictable reactions, expressions of power. I was therefore quite clear that in this respect did not want to risk nothing. From here we concluded that what was of interest mainly, I would say even highest grade, was firmly in keeping a secret problem. Therefore preferred roundabout and difficult way out to contact me, to I convince and I recruit in their ranks. Were used diplomatic channels just to get to me very quickly and to avoid any confusion from other high-ranking individuals? However, political influence and interference in their country are very high, so can manage or even block, if necessary, any rumor or story that you do not agree, I noticed. In addition, this nation's interest to maintain a degree of poverty and stupidity which has reached unbelievable. You know, very Venerable Massini said it. However, their politics has become, especially lately, quite obvious. No, they almost do not even bother to hide it. Appearances are maintained, only the hypocrisy and deceit, showing boundless contempt and total disrespect for nation. Their very strange and cunning policy aims primarily to the Sekatuiska point of view that a nation and to bring that state of total dependence abulik, requiring among other kinds of foreign aid loans, which creates obligations. The main goal is to keep people in this strange state of, unfortunately, as you see, in many cases succeeded. If things continue in this and so there will be a revival of the elements of liability, it is possible that this critical condition of things that cannot be denied by anyone to continue and even increase in next period. That's why I told you it is very important that people know the causes underlying this situation that exists at national and even global. Then you can be sure that those who necessarily have a certain openness of mind will be able, in turn, to awaken in others. It's like an avalanche effect in which, after reaching a critical point which is about 5% of the population development, his is almost exponential, just as the snow which Bogrel. It started small, rolling, accumulating more and more snow, and it quickly becomes very high. In their ignorance, many people unwittingly act in consensus guidelines Freemasonic without even suspecting that they do so practically, the dirty game Masonic groups. However, using intermediaries are very virulent and insidious. Method of using intermediaries who then are like a cannon fodder in action they engage Freemasonry is very old and frequently applied. By this, they take responsibility, and if things go as they watched, they blame always the source term, a finger pointing it to incriminating facts. Committed. I breathed deeply and I turned in his chair. This information seemed to me almost hilarious, but still could not deny the evidence. I thought that there must, however, a path to victory, even when suffering is unbearable. Therefore when I asked with great interest, Caesar, now things are quite clear, but I wonder what would be the most appropriate ways to neutralize the force of evil and diabolical plans of Freemasonry. I felt that Caesar was pleased with the attitude that address. It's a good start, he answered me smiling. The most practical, current context is primarily disclosure of such evil actions of Freemasonry other people, either directly through discussion or by posting them as I suggest you with my stories. It creates a common front of those who are not engaged in Masonic organizations, which will make many of the plans and actions to be Masons unmasked by creating a clear current of opinion against them. Sure that their actions were and are often very insidious, especially geared to blocking, for instance, any brilliant ideas, any great invention, that any qualitative leap able to improve the livelihood of the people. They are the ones that give instructions for both counteract such invention or idea and for bringing the inventor and dismay of a total state of depression, stress and helplessness. Therefore, many prefer to leave the country Saxon and provide exceptional intellectual capabilities in other areas of the world in a way that is absolutely paradoxical situation. You do not believe you had the opportunity to meet the other countries. Although Masons seek, in general, promotion of non-values and annihilation of human beings or even eliminate special initiative and have a great power beneficial action, however I would say that in our country, this plan is made predominantly application. Moreover, political and economic situation of the country shows that Masons work just as I described. They almost always seek to promote men of straw, corrupt people and even to establish a general atmosphere of corruption, in order to thereafter to ensure that infiltration to ensure their success dirty games that they do. Think that if the key items would be placed intransigent and good people faith, they could not admit of intrigue, backstage games and miseries, which, as well you know, currently infest politics and economy. They would not follow, therefore, directives Freemasonic and soon there would be a great revival in people's lives in all areas. The fact that, conversely, things do not follow this course although for years our test changes, reshuffle or commitments and are taking all sorts of promises it can show the true face of Masonic influence, which maintains a very deliberate tension in the country by hiding the truth, by lying and hypocrisy. The more people become more lucid and knowledgeable Freemason plans, especially soon they will oppose this dirty game. Then be made to expose Masonry's evil intentions public. Unmasking is a very useful element in the fight against Freemasonry. Already many of their actions are obvious to everyone, but not are correlated with the Masonic organization. Even if I refer to one example, at the drain intelligence in Romania, would be enough to attract serious attention to how Masonry handling the population. There are many others who have noticed this, who wrote indicating its concern over this phenomenon, though they do not know the true source because of this run of the Romanian intellectuals abroad, knowing nothing or almost nothing about Freemasonry. They put this on account of poverty in the country and the desire for enrichment, with great intellectual ability to undertake abroad. However, when such a state sluggish for many years, it is necessary to analyze the problem from another angle. In fact, Masons often momsk beings with extraordinary intellectual endowments to a life attractive, carefree day tomorrow, research institutes and companies west. In this way, the departure of hundreds and thousands of brains endowed in Romania, they fail to implement eventually. Their diabolical plan to annihilate the impact spiritual awakening must occur in this country, to which the very talented intellectual who went to other states would have made a significant contribution. This revival is very useful because it allows people to become aware of their mission in these difficult conditions. She even gives them the strength needed to withstand certain vicissitudes inherent in the period that Romania, where they are staying just to help awaken fast-track people and other people, but by massive exodus of those special human beings, spiritual awakening may be delayed. A gold alloy is even more valuable as the amount of noble metal, i.e. gold, is C. If this quantity decreases, then it reduces the amount and even resistance alloy. You mean that eventually it is possible to defeat the forces of evil Masonic? I asked, slightly worried. One only said that the revival of this nation may still delay a time, but there is no doubt that it will happen eventually, even if this struggle frenzied seeks to invalidate the Freemasons. Spiritual transformation is inherent even if some human beings skeptical, negative ideas resonating with Masons, their doubts and even the belief that we will not win. This political subversive evil which is maintained by the Freemasons, is mainly intended to generate a negative resonance, absence of hope in people, lack of confidence, extraordinary benefits of this nation until the whole nation can even reach not to have no hope, but when a large mass of people is a hope. They cultivate, nourish and maintain an enthusiastic, thinking about it creatively and positive. It creates a huge current of spiritual force which greatly accelerates realization of that collective aspirations of the people. So I say, if an idea deeply includes beneficial and spiritual masses, then it generates a tremendous wave of positive energy that can be very key to turning this nation. This is valid for any other population in the world. The most important benefit of the ideas would be for people to wake up from deep sleep imposed by the Freemasons and becoming lucid, to act firmly on all other positions, then having an understanding higher on the overall situation at the other pole. But it is terrible when one idea includes negative masses. The principle of resonance is the same, but the nature of energy which is then amplified in excess is profoundly negative, destructive, evil. It causes a state of depression in people, the absence of hope, of confidence in self, and what is more serious, it is heavily contaminated, resulting in a state of indolence, laziness, lack of positive engagement. In such a situation, it is clear that the game's evil Masons can be achieved easily enough. This is how and why they act extremely virulent and a maximum persistently by the media when some people or groups are the spiritual known world horrifying truth about the actions and intentions. Masons from top search then by all means to destroy those persons or organizations, tamper advantage of the credulity of the ordinary man, which can be easily manipulated. Yes, I was amazed and I deeply cunning and manipulating their perfidy people, especially after you told me of the venerable complex plain Mazzini, I commented you. It is conceivable that their intelligence drug fiend Caesar approved me for that time they had available was very limited. I began to relate the discussion to have with Great Mason. Panic at the Pentagon. A second meeting with Senior Mazzini. The situation somewhat balanced. While meeting continued in the spirit of a game of cat and mouse, just like the first time, though now it already knew the true intentions, the venerable, but did not know it. It is true that little my advantage over him does not change too much the problem, but at least allowed me to be more vigilant. My actions had to be very clever, not to disturb relative equilibrium situation. If, for instance, I would not have been outraged and I threatened to reveal all state peak, most likely I would have been immediately passed on a deadline with unpredictable results towards the goal of Masons and even in terms of life. Ultimately, we can say that practically I do not exist in this country. The only file registration is at the office of General Obadiah. I do not have political ties, diplomatic relations, business economics, or social obligations. It is a very special situation, which has many advantages, but carries certain risks. The advantage is that it can access the important data and state secrets related to certain findings or events completely species across the country. By special events refer to situations which are domain inexplicably, at least in terms of modern science or design normal. The disadvantage is that we as a general support than Obadiah, who approaching retirement. I have no enemies because the department is obscured, but he remains a territory can be claimed by SRL only then can problems occur. The scandal was not therefore a solution. I am interested to help this country, not to miss opportunities favorable arise. Perhaps the venerable Mazzini was not very difficult to get my replacement with all the opposition to General Obadiah, but it would have meant much restlessness, uncertainty, and most unpleasant for the Great Masons, led to a indefinite postponement of action. This seems to bother him most. Why the great hurry, especially for what? I asked with an obvious interest. One will tell you immediately, but please keep in mind that neither I nor even those of the elite Masonic world, at least from what I could tell, do not know much in this direction. From what I understand, it seems they have accepted a solution. Compromise does not like working with you, although I confess to you otherwise, but neither are willing to complicate things which may escalate into a genuine scandal, by removing you from office. Yes, it is clear now that would be done already, to place their man in my place, which that would have solved the problem completely and immediately. But, although they may cause my removal function, however, it seems that they lack the main lever for me who will replace them, and then they decided for a compromise solution that has to adjust on the fly. Who changes the function currently set at DM? I asked the innocents. If we know the diplomatic channel, do not think it's too hard to figure which are in fact the real games and who makes them backstage. Unfortunately, the function that we had in government has not allowed me to have access to such information. The room has left a heavy silence. In a later, Caesar replied in a low voice, "Let's leave things as they are in this respect. The fact that the influence that Mazzini is not guaranteed venerable problem solving just as he wanted us can give to understand that not all are corrupt. This is a good thing. Perhaps after the first confrontation with me, after the group reported its results, Bilderberg has proposed to continue the venerable Mazzini initial plan, although it was relatively Mason's risky, however a more rapid action and my induction error in the meantime. However, I found the venerable pretense, and I plan reworked. Initially, if the first meeting thinking to make the game, apparently agreeing to work with them at the second meeting already knowing their perfidious intentions, I just pretend the decision until I get to what really interests them, as was going to block access by revealing that the top state issues. It was, in fact, the risk posed to them, but that just as I said a thought largely annihilated. How say the books were already made in each camp, I said very story about Caesar. Yes, he replied with a smile. When I was informed, a month ago, that Mazzini venerable going to visit me again, I knew that was time peak. These people never do something for free or without a personal interest, therefore, Icke expected that my senior exhibit hotspot of the problem. The fact that he again announced visit made me understand that their decision to the top court decided to build on the version that directly involves me after the first meeting to Tonezra. And somewhat prepared land, the very fact that Mason was great this time host meeting in the luxurious villa of foreign diplomats, where the security systems were perfect, my conviction that what I learned was very important. Throbbed with anticipation. I begged my Caesar Gickley reveal secret. Easily amused, he continued to speak. The meeting did not take long, maybe a little more than an hour. You must confess, however, that the information they gave me perplexed me, Senior Mazzini, even me. I was able to convince myself once again, as they have immense power, Freemasons even at the highest state bodies in the world, infiltrating more much in them and having access to information of paramount importance for humanity. And for her safety. Moreover, the Masons want to control and manipulate these highly confidential information for the benefit of their own, to carry out its earliest plan to control and dominate the entire planet. I met with the patriarch in that villa, and after a few minutes as people I maintained friendly and joking, during which I was careful to reiterate in my failed willingness to adhere to their elitist organization, went directly to Senior Mazzini subject, according to its characteristic style. He then told me that he has information top secret that comes directly from the Pentagon's general staff, and that this information refers to a certain place in Romania. He testified that the Bilderberg Group has most important representatives of political bodies, economic and defense U.S. connections going up to the presidential chair. Beyond the position of influence U.S. President, there are several groups whose occult power is very high, special thanks to links and complex political interests and mutual relations they have with some leading figures, heads of state and bankers at the level international. Finally, beyond even these groups, there are three very strong Masonic which oversees the elite formations, namely, the development of life science and technology around the globe, the orientation direction of movement of the global economy, and established trends and political trends, the parts of the world. Above all is the Bilderberg Group, and within it there are three people who have ultimate discretion over the shares important ideas to be implemented across the planet. But here we Senior Mazzini notice some uncertainty, such as steady as if to make me or not a confession. I felt then that it is an extremely important issue. I would be disclosed fundamental secret of Masonry itself across the globe. However, after a brief hesitation, Mazzini venerable appearance gave the revelation that by continuing to talk to me about highly confidential data from the Pentagon, SBNS me that everything is important and reveals planet is immediately brought to the attention of the global elite. This was the case. Secret observations regarding Romania. Pentagon runs several programs in parallel, military and intelligence secrets geodesic, and for this he has invested fabulous sums in a technology that exceeds much current knowledge of science. Some sources of this technology are fabulous, but maintained a complete secret. Important to note is that, due to capacity, extraordinary technology available to it, and you must know that they exceed 20 years the present possibilities, the current pace of development, the Pentagon has more satellites in geostationary observation than specific tasks. One of them, which is based on bionic technology and the waves form, he saw in 2002 a separate unit within a group of mountain territory our country, specifically in a particular area of the Busigi Mountains. Initially it was thought there was about a strange karst formation, as many others have been identified throughout planet. However, just as he showed me, Mazzini senior specialists, compartment data analysis and intelligence at the Pentagon were later informed his superiors that there are three elements distinct, raises lots of questions about the data were recorded. Characteristic of that area of the Busigi Mountains. First, the empty space inside the mountain was not identified correlation with the outside, but directly within the party began the mountain at some distance its slope. Secondly, he would form a tunnel that it records data had to be very regular and turning sharply at an angle of 26 degrees, to the center mountain. In addition, the tunnel was perfectly flat trajectory, the baseline report mountain, considered as a reference, the tunnel started at third base but the place in a perfectly horizontal plane, but the third element has one more thoughts. Pentagon staff satellite scan of the mountain revealed two major structural blocks within the solid stone, which bordered the beginning of the tunnel and late. Venerable then showed me a copy after a strange computer drawing structures inside the mountain, which was checked and filled with numerous facts and figures. Blocked areas were marked with red, and Venerable explained easily and that they rejected sounding or just any type of analysis, as if to protect something there. It may have been about some artificial energy dams, I said in one breath, amazed by what I found. Just once concluded they were removed one by one, all other possibilities, which included possible interference, metal or other composite, but it made them consider a more delicate issue. Who probably made the whole structure, is not it? I excited. Yes. There have been Icke dismayed by the data and immediately rose to a maximum their security level. The first energy barrier at the top end of the tunnel inside the mountain was flat, straight as a wall that was blocking access to entering a tunnel. The second dam, but the energy was huge, like a dome or hemisphere that located at the opposite end of the tunnel, near the center of the mountain. Venerable Icke explained that, obviously there is something extremely important to driving tunnel, but also was very well protected. I'll draw an scheme we seen, but much easier to be able to have as clear a representation of what been identified there. Almost dumbfounded, and watch the movements draw a precise scheme Caesar approximate strange structure inside the Busigi Mountains. Most of the Pentagon could not understand why the tunnel is between a sort of zigzag towards the center of the mountain, and no significance angle 26 degrees to his involvement in construction. The assembly was in a plain parallel soil and hemispherical energy barrier is on the vertical cliffs which corresponded ridge which is called Old Women. In fact, as later determined measurements our data at the Pentagon, came to about 40 vertical feet of. However, between the Old Women and Sphinx off Busigi, Caesar drew it onto another flat sheet of the assembly scheme. Senior Massini let me understand that the internal structure elements, artificial Busigi Mountains had not yet attracted much interest. Masonic elite world weather representatives of the Pentagon made no observation that the energy barrier hemispherical has the same vibrational frequency and the same shape as one another very secret underground structure, which they discovered several months before near Baghdad. For reasons not yet known and that Massini Venerable revealed it to me, their Masonic elite was extremely interested in time data provided by satellite intelligence about military intelligence. Strange energy structure in the basement off Orag. Shortly afterwards they initiated war and after a few months Americans had access. The biggest secret in the area concerned about the Aragus knew nothing. Venerable told me that however hard they tried, failed to penetrate the wall of energy, but also gave me other details. The whole operation was held in the strictest secrecy. He said only that what was there was about the planet's mysterious past and, in some way with history of their organization. I guess then that Senior Massini holds further information may and even certain documents or evidence in relation to these issues which, however, not was willing to talk to me. The fact that the Pentagon investigation noted the similarity between the structure of data underground near Baghdad and the interior structure of the Busigi Mountains very agitated than those of the elite Masons. As we could notice a large share of this agitation which originally has almost turned into a genuine panic was caused by that structure much larger and more complex than Iraq is on Romania. That in itself seems rather strange, but correlated with some aspects of which I have already talked about Romania's future, you'll be able to get an idea fairly accurate in terms of the concerns that we now have great Masons. Much as they would like to dissimulate this, actions and intentions show otherwise abundantly. Great haste to solve the problem, risk factor who have taken the expressed desire to have access and control structure that are just some things that reinforce my inner direction. Senior Massini gave me all reference data, very secret, the location of Busigi Mountains, from where it could get better and faster at the mouth tunnel. A great mystery was how they managed those who were built to out the structure and goals directly inside the mountain, without any correspondence outside. We both assumed that it was done as a measure for maximum protection against possible that the combination blows. The only explanation of the technology used would be that somehow covered the main entrance to the tunnel after activated energy barrier of protection, but it would have involved a huge amount of rock. Not to mention the tools that were needed for such work. Senior Massini has provided me, also planned to reach the correct tunnel, as it was calculated by specialists from the Pentagon. Closest breakthrough could be achieved in the mountain front, after the point of optimal direction power is on its coast, somewhere at a distance of about 60 to 70 energy meters from the first dam was in depth the massive stone. Although this was the solution fastest, however, no inconvenience dam at the mouth of the tunnel energy which do not know if it can be strappus. Even if he does not have the same vibrational frequency as a great hemispherical energy barrier, we did not know whether or not we have an opportunity to overcome. Working around his was possible but difficult technological problems involved. A second variant consisted also pierce the mountain rock, but this time it worked, somewhat over tunnel to get behind the dam. Drilling distance was greater as needed to observe a particular angle of advance, but even there the chance to bypass the dam energy As for me, I was quite skeptical about this solution because it could very well to imagine that the ancients who made that they could build into it this and to take certain precautions. However, my venerable guaranteed ultra-sophisticated support of US military technology, providing an amazingly powerful device and high-speed drilling of rock, which use a plasma jet very strong and a rotating magnetic field in this way could be reached in the tunnel wall less than 2 days, taking into consideration the necessary preparations. We understand, therefore, first go on this option, and if they fail to address the shorter version, the direct breakthrough of the tunnel to the barrier energy. But the whole operation had achieved the greatest secrecy. If our venerable provide senior technology means we had to organize the rest in such a way that everything seemed not only an ordinary action of diabetes. In addition, one of the essential conditions of Mason was so great that, exceptionally, this action would be reported incorrectly RIS and the presidency as a simple intrusion detection off karst mountains. In addition, Massini Sr. wanted to make a special team from the United States of America to accompany along with several representatives of the elite Masonic our own team during operation. I agreed to this request, citing the inability to ensure information leaks out, but I immediately suggested the presence of these teams' tunnel breakthrough achievement. In reality, there would be no problem ensuring stringent security even in the presence of the American team, but I exaggerated the can intentionally exposes the former secret, just because I knew that was the point. Mason's heel of the problem. I do not want, of course, that they entering along with me there, inside the mountain, but I want to first convince me myself what it is, and depending on what you discover, to take a decision on the site. The situation seems to be very tense, with too many variables, therefore it can ever to become unpredictable and even dangerous for us. However, it is important to reach the tunnel and then hemispherical energy barrier. For this it is necessary to give him the impression venerable that I will work openly as he can provide us important technical means. Are quite high pressures, but on the other hand, he is limited in action because of the desire retention of absolute secrecy. Apparently, none of us knows what is there, but after like I said I feel that an essential element venerable know which one I was not and revealed that one wishes to control exclusively. As I explained, for example, insisted him to be present when the breakthrough. It seemed I was dreaming. It was to be produce something of exceptional importance, and yet I felt everything was almost surreal. You never talked to anyone about it? I asked a Caesar. One spoke privately with Gen Obadiah. It is the only one who knows all ramifications of the problem. We agreed together to postpone the announcement of the action structure senior police, because otherwise the reaction could be elite Masonic terrible. I did not want to risk, especially because we need very advanced technology that they are willing to available to us. This is an action involving national security, and depending on what is found there, it will be perhaps the greatest secret. No, we can therefore act blindly. Caesar looked at him meditatively. Strange destiny of this man made me seriously consider a complicated gear of human relations and interests this world. Ultimately, we all are like bad, more or less. Sophisticated rightly or wrongly convey information of life. Complexity situation then grafted onto the approaching crucial discovery, made me feel the whole body of an unexpected thrill of intense emotions. And now, at what stage is the action? In my inner forum, harbored the secret hope that I succeed and I can see mysterious structure inside the mountain after being discovered. Sazandu me thought, Caesar said to me, for now we are in the midst of preparations, which have to target the attention. I first secured the area. Luckily for us, it is difficult accessible and relatively unexplored. We resorted to military service, even organizing a Minibiza outside perimeter outbreak, which we have identified and isolated one with our team of specialists. We have already secured the guard ring area, bringing there almost 200 soldiers. He built a small access road and was surrounded circular perimeter with barbed wire. We fitted also over 30 pickets guard. Inside we have established a second security circle formed by the 3rd team department. There are 2 improvised road access barriers, which are provided control points. This time is massive and complex logistics, especially the duration action may be spread over several weeks. General Obadiah has dealt with the relationship military ministry for material support, have been brought tense campaign and military communications relay mounted. I wanted to print all actions look and apparent military applications. Perhaps everything will be ready in the next 2 to 3 weeks. In late July arrives plasma drilling device, and thereafter not we only have to penetrate inside the mountain. While no one enters the area only with my consent or General Obadiah I will do so as you can see what we discover. This, of course, if things are as normal, just as they were established. There are many other details are however not much importance. You know now essential in principle, the first outer drill will begin in the last days of July. Until then we see, because the events fall in a straight line and their specific I calls and particular presence there. But as I promised, I will call when everything will be safe and well prepared. Having said that, Caesar stood up and took leave of me. We left with the hope of seeing us again very soon in extraordinary circumstances. We preferred to walk home. Invading my thoughts and assumptions mind, and the myriad possibilities and complexity intrigues almost gave me headaches. I fell asleep that night thinking about the mysterious civilization that all built inside the mountain, making it a proven technology incredible. Who were these beings? From the abyss of time we send the message them. No idea, but hardly a huge surprise waiting for thousands of years to be revealed in the mountains. Big discovery after that meeting with Caesar. All the time my mind was preoccupied with the mystery structure identified within the Busigi Mountains. I wanted very much and I take part in all preliminary and operations at the time of entry into the big tunnel, but realized that it was not possible. I should just thank the opportunity of access for a while short place great discoveries, if not complicated things until then. For a month and a half conversation I had with a Caesar waited feverishly sign from him. I did all sorts of scenarios in mind, I imagined different possibilities and virtually every moment became for me an intense desire to get myself in that place mountains. I had complete trust in Caesar, knew he would do everything possible to me facilitate entry in the main area of the area. Do not ignore the fact that the tension that period must have been enormous and the general shoulder's headpiece, because game very complicated scenes that had maintained a fine balance. What happens when the mountain was really an exceptional case, whose importance was aimed not only national security situation but also to all mankind, if we take into account the enormous interest which is manifested in that direction the world elite of Freemasonry? Operations on the spot and the plan you conceived in Caesar were hampered that, in parallel, it was necessary deception of alertness and other senior Massini the venerable elite. To this, add the pressure of the danger that information to reach the peak of the state structures in such a case, it was unlikely that the situation longer be controlled effectively. Caesar's plan included informing the political leadership state at a definite time. Secret base in the mountains. Long-awaited moment arrived shortly after mid-August. A sunny morning I was contacted through the usual channel, but soon had to realize that precautions that time were much more severe. I will not go into details, which anyway does not matter too more. Shortly after lunch we arrived at a secret military bases in the foothills, where I was taken by Helicopter 0 Department, escorted by 2 soldiers with special uniform, who were armed, from Bucharest, known as alerts or. I escorted one of those who did not utter a word. Changes in vehicle security orders were accompanied only by short, targeted, all the action proved to be rapid and accurate. Although the issues involved and knew only too well why it was necessary ensure maximum security, however, confess that I was less annoyed by the strictness safety measures were taken. Randu considered them excessive. But I came quickly realize that I was hardly able to appreciate its true value at all operation and had to consider myself a very lucky because I was offered unexpected opportunity to have access to what we consider to be probably the most important discovery of modern times. The fact that I was called Caesar and that measure security was extraordinary gave me confidence that, indeed, there had been discovered something of immense importance. Reflect the fact that while the vast majority of people leading their daily lives, often in a manner as may be trivial, this discovery could radically transform all concepts in a very short period of time. She smiled bitterly at the thought that the present world situation, my view, was probably too idealistic. To determine a major transformation involving a fair analysis and understanding of both humanity's past and the profound meaning of life, it takes a skillful diplomacy, intelligence and noble virtues to use sneak among the many obstacles, such as mental, physical or material, which still dominates masses immersed in these thoughts. I noticed almost no lowering of the helicopter, which closer to the new base had been built in the mountains. My reflections have evaporated as the charm to the whole, which is a few tens of meters below me. Although I was somewhat familiar with the operations of military tactics and equipment used in such occasions, however, what I could see at far surpassed any imagination. First, I realized the massive presence of American forces because of the large SUVs, and they are characteristic of massive assemblies, hidden under some huge tilt who see the U.S. flag painted. We could also observe only way to arranged, rather large, coming from the valley through the forest, and the 2 belts access to basic military security. They seemed like a wide border, forming each almost a complete circle, swore a great entry into the wall rock of the mountain. Between the 2 concentric belts there is a park security of military trucks, some vehicles land, and 2-3 vehicles whose form and purpose we could not identify the place. I estimated that during those 2 belts were placed around 200 soldiers. Intricately the belt wore a special uniform, black, and soldiers the outer belt wearing normal uniform. Each of them had automatic weapons, and the distance between them was only a few meters. I saw that soldiers were placed in barracks between the 2 borders, while the special teams were just behind the second belts. The road was blocked by barriers and massive next to each double seat, double picket control every part of it. I appreciated the distance between the 2 belts' security at about 50 yards. It appears that the activity was frenetic, as we see it come and go continuously between the 2 commanders, especially within perimeter focus, up to the wall that had been cut into the mountain. My general comments were interrupted by a helicopter landing place arranged inside the main perimeter after the second ring of security. I got and immediately I was framed by 2 soldiers, who this time were Americans. We moved only about 20 feet from the helicopter, the 2 special teams in front and the Americans behind me. I was told to stop and I was standing there, all 5, about an hour, obviously waiting for my download order. Only then I began to realize the true scale of the operation that place in the area and to infer its exceptional importance. Initially I was surprised by the treatment I was subjected to, not because I would have felt offended, but especially for strictness almost incredible that the shares were held in the database, which I watched on the 4. I felt politely but firmly, did not budge from the position they were in, did not relaxed, have not talked about that, have not blinked for an hour as I waited there. Completely complacent, they gave me the impression of more robots than human beings of. Having no choice, I was still too close to each other, I just spent time when not to sleep. I tried to find out why our expectations, and other detail, but it was as if I had talked to 4 concrete pillars. I understood that orders were extremely harsh and strict and I never asked any questions, waiting for his coming resignation, Caesar. Although it was quite tiring to stand in a fairly long time same place, I used that opportunity to observe closely what is around me. The emotion that had been included since the departure from Bucharest is exacerbated. I was basically less than a meter of the target. Roll dreams and my assumptions, a phenomenal breakthrough that can expect tens of thousands of years to be revealed. Thrill floating in the air contained unknown if the entire base, in a mysterious way ensuffled each person there a special air, seriously, the enigmatic inner focus. In front of me, then the right side where I was, opening the mountain-wide mouth of a tunnel. I could see the modern lighting system was installed in entry and continue through the tunnel. Unfortunately, the angle in which I was, in presence of a large campaign tent and 2 modern modular construction in the form hemispherical, I blocked the light. In the same area where I was principal there were more American jeeps and vehicles, and in my left side were 2 sets huge covered each with a sheet, which by form suggesting that housed huge crates. Whose contents do not know. Mouth of the tunnel was blocked by a wide barrier metal being guarded by one side of 2 American soldiers, suggests that they formed part of their uniformed troops of the elite U.S. Marines. But what particularly caught my eye was the huge hangar carved in stone mountain, which is guarded on the right tunnel. It was huge, measuring about 10 feet height and, as far as I could judge, about 50 meters deep. It was perfectly done, with finished walls and the curved vault flawlessly. I asked what technology they used if they managed to build what I saw in about a month. Later I learned with astonishment that the completion of drilling if not lasted only 1 hangar day. Inside the hall were several boxes stacked on one side and on the other side there were 3 special buildings, like rooms whose long end, I think, could only be the analysis and research. Moreover, within the hangar was somewhat agitated because I could observe many people with white coats, who rushed from those entering or leaving mini labs, carrying various objects or papers in their hands. The middle lane hangar, and out near the mouth of the tunnel, I saw several small vehicles electric motor, which some of the people there used to move them inside. No tunnel or hangar doors were fitted with sliding, probably due to complications construction, which were not currently necessary. Hangar was still on top, a mechanically curtain made of a translucent material, which was not left only a garter of the height of entry. The lighting was impeccable and I observed 2 large generators that operate somewhere down on the side of the mountain, between 2 belts of security and control. At some distance from the big tent campaign, my left was a series of modern barracks and behind them more tents medium-sized campaign, which surely represented the night shelters research and military personnel. But I have not seen anything that resembles the place to prepare food. My conclusion was that it is made with a daily truck, probably a very severe security. Later I learned that the kitchen had been fitted few miles further down the road and that, indeed, a special group of soldiers from the DM Team Daily Road was a truck bringing food to those in the base. This solution was preferred to further reduce staff activity and peripheral decrease also security risks. The table was served separately from each group military to their barracks. Outbreak in the area. It was served in Big Tent campaign, both Romanian and American soldiers and teams of researchers. We learned that Americans came with their food and their chefs, but they were sent together with the Romanian in the kitchen at the foot of the mountain. The two buildings were hemispherical Romanian and staff residences, respectively. The U.S. Caesar later revealed to me that one of them, which was lower living General Obadiah, he and the other two generals were at the Pentagon and an advisor national security issues from Washington. These extraordinary buildings, ergonomic buildings, resembled more of research stations on other planets and left a very pleasant impression, great comfort and safety. The material from which they were made was bordered in white hexagonal surfaces, and there is a peak near wide band of dark blue material. On this band were arranged one kind of huge lights, which I was told that, when lit at night, creating a calm and very beautiful. I watched a while activity in the area, each person moving quickly and gave the impression he knows exactly what to do. From time to time come or leave a jeep, military, or downloading anything from the boxes under the tarp. Unfortunately, distance and obstacles not allowed me to observe objects that were clearly moved. I was still wondering relatively massive American presence, because Caesar had let me understand that it will be only one team to handle the drilling device plasma. Even in times when I was doing different assumptions on this issue, we noted that one of the Romanian military, which was in front of me, took a hand at right ear. He listened carefully and spoke a few words quickly. Immediately after, therefore, we turned to the dark mouth of the tunnel, which as I approached everything seemed bigger and more threatening. We stopped in the same formation near one of the two hemispherical buildings in just a few meters in the side of the tunnel. My heart started to beat me down. Beyond the barrier, wide, guarded by two American soldiers, inflexible, is perhaps the most terrible mystery planet. What happened within a month and a half since the last discussion we had with Caesar? What he discovered in that area of the mountain? I then noticed that the front inside of the tunnel and over a wide swath of about 2 meters there is a rubber band flute, which were lined some U.S. manufacturing electric vehicles. I saw now the tunnels, neon-lit facilities discreetly placed on the ceiling and walls, but the tunnel curved to the left after just 10 meters, so I could not see more. When Caesar came, it came from the corridor leading vehicle electric. With him was an elderly man, gray hair, but a face with features farms, full of determination. Both were serious and silent. Caesar down beside me, and only when 4 soldiers were quietly withdrawn, having welcomed. I met with General Obadiah, who looked at me a few sharp moments, shook my hand vigorously, and after we exchanged a few pleasantries he retired in hemispherical construction. It was obvious to me that Gen Caesar knew all of what I was concerned and that he had given consent to be brought there. Perhaps this move was part of their plan, the exposure of Masonic activities, and found that I needed to be in there. Even though I was only a cog in this giant gear items mysterio, issues and intrigue, I was really glad that I had that golden opportunity, and I decided to pay most of the burden of responsibility that I assume. Great Gallery, the situation is quite critical, said Caesar, concerned. Relationship with the senior Massini become tense, but what is worse is that everything was on the tips of state power. We expecting that, but in any case so quickly. Our intention was to present data problem at a time in the future, which should be more favorable. Now things are very tense, both internally and externally. Do not know how many were spent the last month. Come, I'll summarize the main points while we go through tunnel, he said, heading toward the entrance. In this way save time. I got an electric vehicle, just as Caesar can let me briefly recount how it happens. Moreover, had everything can look more closely and carefully. The tunnel was paved with a thick sheet of rubber. On both sides of it, periphery until it was just stone of the mountain rock. At entry and still along meters were then infiltration of water, but after Cote smooth tunnel to the left, about 10 meters from the entrance, everything became perfectly dry. I was amazed at the accuracy drilling and especially finishing of stone walls that almost seemed sand. White lighted is apparent in a splendid colors of the various parties, geological, discrete lighting inside the tunnel in a surreal game of flashes and shadows. Noise of our footsteps was muffled by the rubber mat, and reigned in the gallery enigmatic atmosphere, but very exciting for me. It was pretty cold way I coded, but Caesar told me that this situation will not last long. The machine has drilled to the top after a strange deviation of the magnetic field. Shortly time, however, I realized the error, so we proceeded to the trajectory correction. Look, right here, Caesar said, pausing in the curve to the left of the tunnel. I stopped and I admired the elegant way of connecting the gallery. After curve, it is perfectly straight path lay 50 feet in a way very like a subway tunnel, although it was perhaps something wider. At the end of this range, the part of the mountain I saw what looked like a huge gate, which seemed to move through sliding to the left, now occupies less than 1/4 of the width of the gallery. Were also 2 armed soldiers, and the place was well lit throughout circumference tunnel. There was also a modern lodge, narrow but quite long on right side, just before the big entrance to another gallery. One could already see, this entry was guarded by the enormous sliding door. I knew then that this was beginning of the adventure, the great discoveries had been made. I remembered the sketch which Caesar drew our last meeting, and I realized that it corresponded to reality when I saw that, at least as regarded the mysterious place in the mountain galleries. One was amazed at the technology they had available to Americans, he told me. Caesar. Plasma drilling machine is not large, but it requires special equipment for those that are in place around her and drilled. It is something similar equipment anti-nuclear radiation. I myself have put on such a boring suit and watched very close. Show that when you are behind the lens that portrays containing a sophisticated protection is almost incredible. You have the feeling that the stone is actually melts under the action of the plasma jet, but actually made very rock malleable, up near the pour point, and is immediately shaped circular pressure exerted by the rotating magnetic field and also targeting the plasma jet. There is no dust and debris are even negligible. Penetration rate is tremendous for such work. The distance from the entrance up to the 2 soldiers that you can see there was flown in just 5 hours. In the end everything remains as it was, polished and very clean, so that the rubber mat and plants were already prepared at the mouth of the tunnel before drilling machine to be ejected. As we headed to the big gallery, Caesar told me that initially drilled in a different area of the mountain to seek to avoid the energy barrier of entry the main tunnel inside the mountain. They chose a location above, on the coast about 300 meters from the area in which it was set upon, and have drilled a few days because the distance to the tunnel was much higher and the penetration was not horizontal, which might make more difficult technical procedures. Eventually they arrived at the tunnel wall, but an effort to break through was in vain. Do not assign any of the plasma jet or the magnetic field the teeth or cutters. They had to abandon that option and to bridge into Farazra just a gallery. He therefore returned to the starting point and started flat rock pierce the wall until they reached the barrier energy. Drilling was being watched every moment on the control screens and was correlated with distance to the energy area. A few meters before the start of this I gave gallery you see now, so everything had to do was connecting the 2 tunnels, he said. Caesar. Meanwhile we reached the entrance, which was guarded by 2 soldiers of the Forces Special. After the uniform and insignia on it, one was Romanian and one American. A military greeted Caesar, who turned a few yards right to the booth. The American went inside, where probably have a control desk, for a niche construction immediately appeared. Long metal arm with a complicated way. Was articulated arm. Caesar raised an eye level, and after a few seconds there was a access beep. Were taken every precaution. I called him back with me. My iris fingerprint was analyzed and stored as an information code. Security system not react until a laser beam to read my iris or General Obadiah. Now, for instance, was off laser sensor system, very complicated, which was mounted right here at the entrance. It is invisible, and if I would have gone directly to the fire basic alarm automatically. We generals refused fingerprinting of Americans, and iridology insisted that access to Great Gallery belong exclusively to us. From here they started. In fact, the first problem, he said thoughtfully. I noticed that the booth was an extension beyond the gate, the Grand Gallery of also coming out of a laser device to read the iris. Caesar explained that this was the return of the Grand Gallery. I also learned that he could cancel the system security through the application while reading the iris, palm and fingers his right in a particular place. This method was used when they had to be made mass transport through the Great Gallery. Caesar went back a few feet and began to explain, energy work around the dam area. It is basically a projection energy, but we could not figure out how it was done. We cannot understand also how was it possible that the energy barrier to subsist continuously for millennia on end. No, you know the source of fuel or technological means by which this is achieved work. Basically, except that I was able to penetrate beyond it, we were not clear in any other respect, however, involved a matter of overcoming tragedy. I was in Caesar's back on the ceiling of the gallery, where realized connection with the Great Tunnel. In fact, the first gallery were a few meters from the mountain rock on a larger diameter than the gallery dug by U.S. plasma device, this portion of the walls were not finished, but irregularly, with many corners. In addition, this area gallery, which was about 6 feet in length, but was not being circular section-esque air. Connection was made only 2 galleries at ground level, which was leveled a slight downward slope, from gallery to gallery antique scale higher. The height difference was about 1 meter and one could well observe the area ceiling, the combination of the 2 tunnels. Drilling was almost concentric with antique gallery, but none could explain how it was possible that the tunnel began suddenly, within the mountain. It was clearly an artificial work. The possibility that the entrance has been covered a distance of about 60 meters was not credible because of the massive stone structure was identical to that of surrounding rocks. I asked him what happened when Caesar came to the energy barrier. At that moment, talking with General Obadiah and the General's Pentagon certain aspects of database security. We have been notified that it has achieved piercing and unification of the 2 galleries. By the time we arrive and the military had already started retract the plasma in the gallery. The first 3 of a special intervention team department crept in to see the conditions of the new gallery. This was a big mistake because they ignored protocol action. They jumped step level of a meter between the 2 galleries and began to investigate the area about 4 meters that knew that have up to a barrier energy was invisible. Unfortunately, no one could explain how things happened. Perhaps 3 were very close to the energy barrier because moments later to heard a strange noise, but strong, like a short circuit. I found collapsed on the bottom invisible barrier, with strange twisted bodies, as would be bounded by precise edge of a wall. All 3 were dead. Doctors said their deaths instant cardiac arrest. This created some panic, although we have tried to defuse the incident. As I would soon realize, the panic was determined more among the American staff and due to the fact that initial fears of members it's starting to come true. Really, at that time I had virtually no way. Ancient gallery access. Lateral drilling failed due to unknown material resist any attempt to break down and energy barrier proved to be impregnable. Venerable Massini was also present there and asked me to say at that time.